do, what I do with all of these classes is, as you know, I record them and then I transfer them up to YouTube and I'll make them available for you. And that's the way I've been doing it. And I guess mainly for the people that aren't here. But I thought I would hit some important points tonight. I mean, we hit the ground running, but I thought I would really highlight some important things the first couple weeks, and really highlight some things for you for the semester, maybe some things I'm looking for, give you a chance to ask some questions. But why don't I jump in talking about the course a little bit? And then I'll be giving you some time as you think about what I'm talking about and going through some things. Think about any questions you might have for me about the course, concerned about requirements. As I go through what I'm talking about, I will, highlight for you some of the things I'm looking for, some of the things we'll be doing this semester, some of the expectations. So with that, let me screen share a PowerPoint with you. We call this course developing leadership skills. Of course, I think the title of the textbook is what, management skills. Many times we use the expression I use the expression management and leadership interchangeably. I think you need to have both. And so there's a lot of distinction set up between management and leadership. I think success today requires both types of skills. Usually when you're talking about management skills, you're talking about getting things organized and, keeping the organization going, all those skills that are necessary. And sometimes people talk about leadership, they're thinking about what's it mean to empower and get people moving to get things done. That's kind of a loose distinction I set between them. I think for you to be successful, you need to have both sets. There's a lot of ways of learning how to be a good leader. One is just attempting to lead, kind of putting yourselves in situations where you can move things along, and probably you've had a lot of opportunities in life to do that. Another way you can learn about being a leader or developing is just kind of observe people in action. Another one, just talk about it, share information with each other, read about it, write about it. I think all of these ways we'll be working on this semester in terms of leadership, just ways of studying and learning about it. And I'll talk a little bit about how we've organized this course. In this course, leader and manager are interchangeable. And I think the key question is what differentiates effective managers from less effective ones. If I asked, I would probably venture to say that one of the most distressing things people find in the workplace are relationships with their bosses or with the management. Is probably one of the more distressing things that people face, that maybe you face or facing it now. Ineffective or less effective managers. So I think that's the big question. What does it mean to be effective or less effective manager leader? And what we're going to be focusing on in here are skills. We're not talking about style or orientation or belief system. We're going to be talking about skills, things that you can observe. We're not talking about traits. People talk about the early history of leadership was studying traits of people. And there are tons of books out there about we find someone who we identify as a leader, and then we write books about them, and we write about their traits. That's not what leadership or what we're about in here. What we're about is looking at what are key skills that you can develop and change, and develop, and how you can be improve. In fact, when we talk about skills, we're talking about the vehicle by which, or the vehicles by which you practice tools and techniques, your style of work to produce effective outcomes. We're talking about, and what we've identified in this course are the building block of all that management stuff you read about, how to plan, how to organize, how to control, all that kind of stuff. What are the basic building blocks? And really, and what we've done in here, the reason I like this particular book that we've chosen, and the way we operate this course, is everything that is in the book that I gave you has been painstakingly developed from solid research. They're not just war stories or opinions of people. Many of them may sound like opinions, but they're really based on some pretty solid research, all these skills that we'll be talking about in here. And so, well, a lot of the learning, I could be teaching you this course about leadership, and you may have had courses like this where we would have a course on leadership, and I would have a topic that I would lecture you about every week, and I would give you some books to read, and I would give you some tests or have you write projects or do term papers, and you could do some really excellent work about understanding what leadership is, what all the good theories are that have been out there over the years, and you could write an excellent paper for me. But the one question I have is, at the end of this semester, are you going to have improved as a leader? And I would venture to say that cognitive based, which is what that first approach, without exposure to real life experiences and practice, doesn't necessarily correlate well with success or improvement. And just the fact that you could get an A in the type of leadership course that I described does not mean that you're a better leader. And really, what my big goal for this course is that at the end of this semester, you will have had an opportunity to improve a few areas, and you will have a much better sense of what it means to be a leader and a manager, and will have moved along and are better off now than when you came in. That's my hope. And that's kind of the approach that I'm taking, and the skills we're looking at, things that are practical. I think you might find that some of the things we're talking about in here might correlate with some issues that you're facing right now on the job or at work. But before moving on, just in a little bit in the general introduction, I want to spend a few minutes talking about the concept of emotional intelligence. Are you familiar? Is anyone familiar with that word, that expression? Anyone have an idea of what that means? Emotional intelligence. Joseph, you want to take a stab at what it means?
I would say emotional regulation in certain settings. So, I mean, kind of like maturity to a degree. I mean, I don't know if there's a better way to put it, but I think just kind of being able to work well in different settings and kind of regulate your emotions and understand other people's emotions in those settings.
That's a good crack at it as far as I'm concerned, at the definition. Anyone else have a thought when you hear that expression? What's it mean to you? Have you heard people use it?
Yeah, I've heard my dad like use it like in terms of business. And I like for me, I think it like means kind of like your ability to like handle like difficult situations like emotionally. So like how are you going to like handle it and move forward and like instead of like letting that difficult situation like hurt the outcome, you're gonna use it to help the outcome.
Okay. We use the expression intelligence. Anyone else have any comments before I say anything else? The reason I highlight it a little bit is I think in many ways we're talking in the rest of the MBA program, you're not going to come to you're not going to interact with the kind of concepts we're going to interact with here. MBA program, you're learning about a lot of technical skills or discipline-based skills, but whether it's accounting or finance, etc. This one is that nebulous factor of human behavior is what our focus is here. And some would say, and the reason I got interested in this when I went through my MBA and my experience, all the experiences I've had, most organizations screw up because of this stuff, because of all the political tensions, the interactions between people, etc. Most organizations have all the technical expertise they need. It's in a lot of these human behavioral areas where we have problems. So, and this concept of emotional intelligence, I find, is pretty important. You know, Daniel Goleman is the first person that talked about it. It's a phrase for a different kind of way of being smart, and it's not the usual way. We think of IQ, academic smarts. It's really how you do life, how you manage yourself, your feelings, how you get along with people, whether you're empathetic, your motivations, all of those kind of things. You know, how do you know whether you should trust somebody with a confidence? Or how do you know if someone's on the verge of some kind of a breakdown? Or two people are really going at it in an argument. How should you behave? Or how should you respond to a racist or a sexist joke that occurs? These are all tied up in that whole area of emotional intelligence. You know, our emotional intelligence is what the word is, tied up with emotions and feelings. And if you could picture your brain, your emotions and feelings happen in the what is that part of the brain, the real primitive part, first part to develop. Emotions hit you before they get to your rational part of your brain, and a strong emotion hits you and can hijack you before your rational brain even has a chance to engage, and this may prevent you from addressing problems rationally. Think of road rage, etc. It's especially important in higher level jobs, leadership. It's critical for working in groups, effectively managing diversity, adapting to new situations. Some of the 4 key areas, well, there's 5 areas, but in this course, we're primarily associated with 4, and you're going to take an assessment. A big part of it is self-awareness. Are you aware of the emotions you are feeling? Are you aware when you're angry or sad or upset? And then emotion management, how well do you control your emotions so that your responses fit the situation? The last two, empathy, how well do you recognize emotions in others? And then how do you manage the emotions of others? The one in the middle, self-motivation, is being able to use your emotions in a desirable way. So this, when I use the word expression emotional intelligence, this is kind of the definition we're using. And it's really looking at four areas. And when you do the assessment in here that I put in for this first 2 weeks, it really measures kind of an overall EQ score for you, but it also kind of points to which of these four areas are you weak in. You can be really great at recognizing emotions in others and managing other people, but you may be lousy at controlling your own emotions. So there is a lot to this. It has to do with what's going on in you and what's going on with others. So the reason I highlight a little bit, it's been found to be related to leadership ability, group performance, interpersonal performance, managing change, just the ability to conduct performance appraisals. So those are important in the business setting. And by focusing, I guess I can tell you what, or a sense of what this course will be about. And it's really about being able to analyze and learn about these behavioral dimensions of management and leadership that we're talking about. So just quickly going through this, when we talk about management skills in here, we're talking about skills that are behavioral. They're something that you can see and touch. They're not necessarily attributes or styles or traits. They're something that you can do something about. They're things that you can develop and improve. Many of these skills are interrelated and overlapping. And many of them are contradictory and paradoxical, and I'll explain what that means. But before I do that, what I'd like you to do maybe in chat is just throw in there some important skills. Maybe just write one or two skills in chat that you think are really important from a manager's point of view. What are 1, 2, or 3 that come to mind? And if you have the ability to put it in chat, why don't you? And we can see what everyone's talking about. Okay. Tim talked about feedback. Anyone else? If you can't put in chat, why don't you shout it out? Okay, Katie talked about listening, effective communication, motivate people. Anything else that hits people? Respond to criticism. All right. You know what I wrote? Here's one I wrote I didn't send. Very good, Doug. We were on the same wavelength. Training, being able to teach, train others. A lot of yours had to do with communication, giving feedback, listening. Well, communication happens to be one of the big topics in here. delegate training, motivating people. So I think you're hitting them. One set of skills talks about being our human relation, which you talk about being participative. Another set of skills, though, is how to gain power, how to compete with each other. So they're contradictory. You know, for you to be a successful leader, manager, you have to know about gaining power and using power, which seems to be contradictory to being participative and collaborative. You're asked to be innovative and entrepreneurial. You're asked to help people change, but then you're expected to manage order and rationality to get things done in an organized way. At another level, you're asked to blow up the organization and be creative. So you're going to be going, the skill set that you have is paradoxical. One of the things I aim to do is get you away from dualistic thinking, either or thinking. I think that's one of the characteristics of highly successful people that I've run into, is they don't think in either or black and white ways. So the model for learning in here that we're going to talk about, and then I'll go through the list of skills that we're going to focus on. We're going to talk about skill assessment. So I'm going to be focusing a lot of time in here on you assessing yourself. And if you looked in the beginning at the activities, these first 2 weeks, I have a ton of self-assessment activities I'm asking you to do. And those are pretty important, and they're pretty objective. Almost every one of them are survey instruments that have been validated. And there's not necessarily right and wrong answers here. It's getting a sense of who you are and where you are. All of us are different in terms of where we fit with all these skills. So part of it is assessment, part of it's skill learning. The textbook, which is an excellent read, it's the kind of book that you probably would want to keep on your shelf. So the cognitive aspect is reading about what do we mean when we talk about these skills? What do we mean when we talk about communication or handling conflict or gaining power or motivating others? What's that really mean? There's ways to do analysis, and there's ways to do practice skills, some of the cases, some of the things. One of your big assignments that you'll be doing over the next 8 weeks is I'm asking you to identify for yourself one skill that you want to improve. And I think I ask you to tell me what that is in a couple of weeks. And I'm going to give you some time to get into the course a little bit to find out what that skill might be. You might already know a skill that you want to improve. You might say, I gotta really improve my handling of stress at work. Or you could say, hey, I'm becoming a manager. I really got to know more about what it means to delegate to other people. And I got to practice delegating. So these are the types of things. Some people focus some attention on presentation. I really have a horrible time speaking up in meetings. I sit back, I don't share in meetings like I think I should. That might be a skill you want to improve. What I'm asking you to do is pick one skill that you want to improve for the rest of this semester. I have a very structured way for you to present that and do it. That's part of the assignments. that you'll see. So that's one of the big assignments for the semester. And your final paper for the semester is what's called a skill development paper, and where you're going to write about the skill you picked and what you did this semester to improve it, what you learned about it, etc. So just quickly, that's one of the important one of the important assignments for this semester. So this slide just puts in here skill assessments. I'm going to give you survey instruments and those kind of things. Because this is online, we won't be able to do a lot of different things. We'll be able to do some of these things. Skill learning, you have what's in the textbook. And the textbook offers you various behavioral guidelines. There's cases. The skill practice is what you're going to be doing a little bit with the skill you're working on. And then we'll have some assignments that may ask you to apply what you're learning to maybe work situations or things that you're working on the job. So that's kind of the notion of how you develop skills. So here are the skills of effective managers. These individuals, Wetton and Cameron, I had known and met Kim Cameron. I knew him when he and Wetton were working on developing the first edition of this textbook. We've been using this textbook in this class ever since the first edition. We've always believed at LaSalle in a very, very practical approach to this type of course, this behavioral course. We've always had a behavioral component to the MBA program. But back in the 60s and 70s, there were a lot of criticism of MBA programs that they were teaching people about management, but they weren't showing them how to be better managers. And this is something we've been doing for a lot of years, focusing on what I would call a very practical approach to leadership and management. In fact, we used to teach a weekend course that went all day Saturday and all day Sunday that really put you in a learning environment that was 100% practical. And we went through various things. But anyway, they did a lot of research looking at what people had written over time. They did a lot of research with organizations around what were critical leadership management skills. And here's what's turned up on the list: verbal communication, listening, which you brought up, effective decision-making, problem solving, recognizing and defining, delegation, team building, managing time and stress. I'm not sure that's one that would turn up on a lot of lists, but it's highly related to productivity. And next week, we're going to be spending some time on that. Motivating and influencing others, goal setting, setting a vision, managing conflict, being able to negotiate, gaining power and influence. And then the other one I've really highlighted there, self-awareness. And you wouldn't think this would appear on a leadership list, but the most effective leaders I have met over the years have been highly self-aware. They constantly seek feedback on how they behave and relate to people. So self-awareness is the starting point. It's the most important one on this list. And that's the first chapter. And a lot of the stuff associated with this course in the skills we're working on are really focusing around self-awareness. So before I say a few words about self-awareness, let me just quickly go through some things in the course with you, okay? But before I do that, does anyone have any questions? Anyone have any questions? I know I'm rushing through some stuff a little bit. Let me just kind of look at the course a little bit and see if you have any questions there. I think you saw this and you getting started with the course. Some of you I know have introduced yourself. I asked you to fill out an information form for me. And then this is the module we're on tonight. And just a quick overview of it. And there's the link, a couple videos that I think you might want to watch. And then here are some survey videos. Oh, here are the inventories I put in there for you to fill out. All right. Now, I don't know if you've published or if you've purchased the My Lab. I think some of you may have purchased that. There are some surveys in there, but also I put many of the same surveys here. And these are the kind of surveys I'd like you to do. Like here's one on emotional intelligence, cognitive style, core self-evaluation, tolerance of ambiguity, locus of control. Some of these relate to chapters 1 and 2. Like this type A personality relates a little bit to stress management. Here's a time management assessment. Here's one on, are you a procrastinator? Here's a job burnout survey I'd like you to take. All of these are kind of your work for the next couple of weeks. And you might want to get this week on self-awareness, read that chapter, but I didn't really have any big heavy duty assignments due at the end of this week. I'm looking at your first 2 weeks here. And if you go to these surveys and inventories, and then there's an assignment associated with these surveys and inventories too. So I just wanted to highlight this. And I'll be putting these Zoom things up on tonight. What also we have for you, which you can view as you take these surveys on these lecture materials. Okay, here's some videos on self-awareness, but also the surveys and inventories. Here they are again. There's some videos. There's also, videos associated with these surveys that give more explanation to them. For example, so as you do some of these surveys, like the cognitive style, emotional intelligence, tolerance of ambiguity, I'll talk about these, but here's some videos that you can look that one of our instructors put together. So definitely you should take the survey, look at these, because these form an important part of this whole course, all these surveys that you're taking. Every week, whenever when we're doing a chapter, there's a lot of self-assessment surveys associated with it. So as you go through this first module and do some of these surveys, you'll see these assessments. And kind of think of these first 2 weeks together. Next week on managing personal stress. If you look at the lecture materials there, there's some stress videos and different things on that. The assessments associated with, though, are I've given you this week. The lecture materials. Whoops, I'd already showed you that. Excuse me. I'll be talking next week when I do the stress man. Look at that, January. I didn't put the right date in there. Now let me just highlight some assignments for you. One of the things I'm asking you to do is this assignment. It's a worksheet I'm asking you to do. Like this, when you take the self-assessments, I'm asking you to comment on your scores for yourself and briefly interpret them. And that's what that assignment's about. And here's an assignment on the stress. Okay, here's that skill development contract I talked to you about. Let me show you what it looks like. So I'm asking you to pick a skill that you want to improve. And here's all the questions I want you to answer. So here's an example. Here's someone that wants to provide useful feedback to their direct reports each month. They want to improve giving feedback. And this is an example. So what I'm asking for each of you is to pick one skill and then fill out this survey. All right. So that's in the third. I'm asking for you to turn that in at the end of the third week. But you can start working on your skill before that. Then one other assignment I want to comment on is a skill analysis paper. I haven't put it up there for you yet. It's going to be due April 21st. This is one of the major assignments in the course. And all of the stuff you're doing now with all these assessments is a big part of this course. What this paper is, and some of you might consider it, or I consider it, one of the more, probably one of the more important papers you might want to work on, or you're going to work on. It's going to take you some time. What I'm asking you to do is to treat yourself as if you're an organization and do a strategic plan for yourself. And I want you to talk about what's your mission. What I'm asking you to write is a mission statement for yourself. What's your vision? What are your values that you believe in? What are your assets and your liabilities? It's like doing a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, a SWOT analysis on yourself. And you're going to use all the material of the assessments we're asking you to do, plus any other assessments you may have taken at work, etc., in trying to capture for yourself. And so this is the biggest paper you're taking. What I've put in the assignment are some sample papers that other people have done that you can look at. All right, and so those are a couple things I wanted to highlight from the course. It's important uh, uh, trying to get off to a good quick start these first 2 weeks with the assessments. As you know, from 8-week classes, try and keep up with things in here. Because I know things can get out of hand pretty quickly. I tend to be pretty flexible with you. If you're not going to be able to get stuff done, just kind of let me know. I don't penalize you if things are late, but it is important to try and keep up with this. But I wanted to highlight the really big papers. Then every week there's some assignment to do when we, have assignment associated with conflict, et cetera, which you may have seen as you look through the course. I do have one group activity that I haven't highlighted yet. What it's going to require is some organization, because what I'm going to do is an interactive group activity. I'm going to break you all into smaller groups, and I need for you to pick a time in your small group when all of you can come on the computer at the same time for about an hour and 20 minutes. I don't know if do I have anyone from on the other side of the world, or I think everyone's pretty close. Sometimes if we have different time zones. But I'm going to ask you in your small group to pick a time where you could come together for a group activity. This is when we get to the chapter on group dynamics and teamwork and the importance of that. All right. Any burning questions anyone has before I move on? Don't be shy. I'm not going to.
Yeah, I have a quick question. When will the skills analysis paper be like published on Canvas? Because I noticed it wasn't available.
Which one is that?
The skills analysis paper. The
Oh,
one you were talking about.
Yeah, I will get that out to you. In fact, I'm sorry, I should have that when I saw it tonight. So I'll do it as soon as I get off tonight.
Okay, thank you.
I thought that was already published. I apologize for that.
No worries. Thank you.
Please bear with me. There is so many things in this with if you see something, let me know. If something doesn't look right, one of the problems with online classes, there are so many links and stuff that I know I missed it. So if you see something like that, feel free to yell at me and tell me about it. But Tim, I thought that was one that was already up, so I'm glad you mentioned that. Anything else?
Yes, I have a question. The assessments that are at the beginning of the chapter, is this something that we're kind of just writing out on our own, or is it that we're doing it and saving it and submitting it to you?
You're going to be doing those assessments for yourself.
Okay.
And the only thing I will be asking you for is I don't need to see your assessments. I'm going to ask you how you interpret them for yourself, maybe.
Okay.
And that what the some indicate sometimes if you know what the numbers mean that you get back on the assessment. I just want to make sure you understand. You have a good understanding of what the assessment's trying to do for yourself. So for each of you, they'll be different, but I'm more interested in how you interpret it. Like on the personality one, do you turn out as an introvert or an extrovert? Those kind of things.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Let me talk. Any other questions? Okay, let me talk quickly about self-awareness. And I happen to think this is probably the most important skill. And there's a good friend of mine, retired executive from General Electric. And he had a personal coach that he hired as a consultant. And what this person did, and the company, he had 360-degree feedback. This person used to get information from his people that reported to him and give him feedback on what people were saying about his style and how he operated. And it was an attempt to build his self-awareness and his skill set. One of the big things in here is none of you are going to do everything optimally. There is nobody in the world that's an optimal at everything. And the most important, and I think if you can adopt that thought for yourself, that, you know, if you look at yourself like a company, what are strengths and weaknesses? Well, what you do with weaknesses, you either learn about them or you manage them. And that's what we're asking you to do here, is not to feel bad or feel like you're unaccomplished because you're weak in this particular area or not as strong. In fact, for a lot of us, our strengths are also the source of our weaknesses. So what we are strong in is its opposite, is where we may be weak. And so if you're highly analytical, you may not have developed the people-related skills. And you may have real high people orientation skills, but not very strong at the analytic side of things. So each of us are very different in the strengths we bring. And what's important is you know your strengths and limitations, so you can manage them, either improve them or manage them. Also, I think the other thing with awareness, and which I try and develop in here, and I think what the textbook is good for, is giving you a lot of different perspectives from which to look at a situation. Situations are very nuanced, and as many perspectives as you can bring to a situation, the more effective you are as a manager and a problem solver. So we start with self-awareness, and it's awareness of your personality, your interpersonal style, your values, and understanding how these can be assets or limitations for you. Do your own perceptions of yourself correspond with others' perceptions? What's that? Robert Burns, the famous poet, said, "Oh, some power the gifty give us to see ourselves as others see us." Well, that's what we're about in here. For hopefully, you know, there's a bit of a congruence between how others see you and how you see yourself. So in you know, as we move through this course, there's a lot of personal skills that's we're starting with, you know, developing self-awareness and managing your personal stress and solving problems. These are personal. There's a whole set of skills that talk about your interpersonal abilities, and they have to do with communicating and building relationships, gaining power and influence, motivating people, managing conflict. These all have to deal with interpersonal issues. And then there's a third set that I call group skills. You know, leading teams, participating on teams, empowering people, groups of people, leading positive change. So that you think of yourself as a leader and a manager, you think about managing yourself, you think about managing others interpersonally, one-on-one, and then you think about managing in groups. It's kind of a perspective to put on this. So one of the enigmas of self-awareness that you might find is that all of us want self-knowledge, and it's a prerequisite for growth. In order to grow, you have to know where you stand. However, we don't like to get information. We kind of avoid, you know, the day your boss is doing your personal evaluation at work is a day of approach avoidance. You desperately want to get that feedback, but there's a lot of fear associated with it. So we are nervous about getting feedback. It's not something that we want it, but we avoid it too. And there's a lot of fear associated with it. And part of it is we may not trust the person giving us the feedback. So what and then associated with that is this concept of a sensitive line. It's the point at which you and I become defensive when we get information that's not consistent with our self-concept. So whenever we get information that comes up to our sensitive line, we tend to shut down, and we don't let that information get in. So part of the goal of this course is to help you move that sensitive line. Now, we will tend to be, let me just move on. We will tend to want to cross that sensitive line if the information is verifiable, predictable. So that's one of the reasons I'm relying on assessments. So, and when you take these assessments, they're not necessarily the end all and be all about you. But if they make sense about other feedback you're getting, then you might say, you know, this information is telling me something that I better think about. So we do tend to trust information that's verifiable, predictable, controllable. We do tend to accept feedback if we ask for it. If we trust people, we'll tend to accept that. So to cross the sensitive line, we have to be free to self-disclose some things about ourselves, and then we have to get feedback. There's a concept I like. It's called the Johari window, and I think this concept is a good one to explain relationships, to explain growth, how we grow as individuals. None of us are born with an understanding that we're good leaders. We get that through feedback from others. So if you look at a chart, one part of the chart are stuff that is, you know about yourself. If you look at the top of the chart, that one axis is things known to you, things that you know about yourself, and then maybe things that you might not know about yourself, some hidden potential in you. On the other side are things that others know about you, and others, and what others don't know about you. So if you look at that axis, known to self and known to others, that's the public arena. So right now, you and I know a little bit about each other. What you know about me and what I know about you is kind of small, but there is a public area there. And it's through getting feedback from others that you begin to learn about what your blind spots are, what your hidden potential is. And it's through the process of disclosure that others get to know about you. Now, the more others get to know about you, the more and better their feedback is to you. So this is a very, very dynamic thing happening here. This whole notion of getting feedback and disclosure, that's the way we grow. But also, you know, there's a lot of issues around trust and risk and everything involved when we do that. But we have to be able to get feedback in order to know what our potential is. So it's through the process of getting feedback that we tend to push back on those areas of things we don't know about ourselves. And when we disclose, we tend to push back the hidden area of other people. And so the dynamic of that whole process is this whole big area of real hidden potential, that fourth quadrant down there. And interestingly, this chart really is a brief or a picture of how relationships develop, by the way, how friendships develop, how work relationships. If you work for me, how much information should I give to you? And then the more information I share with you, the more willing you are to share with me. So this can be looked at from development of interpersonal relationships to the development of work relationships. The whole definition of trust. I disclose information to you because I trust that you're not going to use that information against me. And then the more information I disclose and the more you don't use it against me, the trust develops. So this Johari window, in my mind, explains a lot. But in terms of you learning about self-awareness, feedback's pretty critical. Managers who do not seek feedback and managers who only seek positive feedback have unrealistic self-views. Managers who seek negative feedback, critical feedback, have realistic self-views and are seen by others as more effective. People are seen as more effective when you convey to them that you don't believe you're perfect and have all the answers. In other words,
welcome to your NFL headlines of the day.
Alexa, stop. Sorry. Alexa's coming after me. So when we're doing this self-awareness, this chapter, what we're looking at here are 5 big areas. And that's what you're asked to look at this week. What's your core self-evaluation? These are part of your underlying personality attributes. How do you see yourself right now? I'm asking you to look at emotional intelligence a little bit in terms of your own personal handling of emotions and how you recognize them in others. What are your attitudes toward change? How tolerant are you of change? What's your cognitive style? How do you like to learn? How do you like to take in information? And then what are your values? I don't spend a great deal of time on values. I recommend reading all this. I do ask you to focus on your values when you do that skill analysis paper. So that's the big area here. Whoops. And then finally, a comment on what I call appreciating difference. You're going to find as you start to go through all this, and if you were operating in a team, you would even see it more. If we were sharing this information in a group, you're all going to be very different. And part of this, going through these assessments is enabling you to begin to appreciate the difference between you and
look it up. Tony. More definition.
Oops, there you are. Sorry, Rashid, I had to mute you a little bit there. But appreciate difference. Some of you are going to be, some of you like to take in information by talking to other people. Some of you like to take in information by reading. Some of you are more introverted and than others. It doesn't mean extroverts are bad people. It just means they're different. So part of this is appreciating the differences. a lot of times we have a tendency to set distinctions between people that are different. We create distinctions. And this is what creates the barriers we find. So a big part of this course is appreciating difference, especially appreciating the differences that we all bring with regard to these skill areas. And I'll talk more about that. And, so a big hallmark of this course is learning to appreciate differences and appreciate more, rather than setting distinctions up. And sometimes people have conflicts with each other simply because of their differences in personality or their different skill sets. Marketing types are very different from accountants, accounting and finance types, etc. And it's difference and it's different skill sets. Can we appreciate those differences rather than judge each other on them? So that pretty much is a quick nutshell of what we're looking at, in terms of that self-awareness, and you're going to get into it more this week. I'm going to talk about it next week, even a little more, and we're going to get into the whole managing stress, etc. So dig in and get started through all those assessments and some of the things in there. And as I said, I tried to front load the first 2 weeks of this course, where there's a lot of work in the first 2 weeks. And that's why I didn't have any heavy duty assignments at the end of this week. So you would have a couple weeks to really get into these first 2 chapters. I'm around if you have questions. If you text me, email me, I'll get back to you. And as I say, feel free to call or text if you'd like to chat about anything. Before I sign off, does anyone have any thoughts or questions? If anything's not clear about the course, feel free to get in touch. All right. I will stop